Penguin Random House Audio presents The Road to the Country, a novel by Chigozie Obioma, read for you by Junior Nyong'o. To Adama, who first called me Daadi, and to the memory of all who perished during the war. The story of a war can only be fully and truly told by both the living and the dead. Igbo proverb. It is not easy to speak about Biafra. It was like the end of the world, of civilization. Half of the population was starving, dying, and most were too weak to even care about sheltering from the war going on around them. Writers and journalists who were there, like Kurt Vonnegut, would tell you that this war was of such scale that more small weapons were used within the borders of this small country than in the Second World War. If World War I produced new diseases like trenchfoot, this war gave us new diseases like kwashiorkor and cankermoris. The war was the reason the French doctors who were here formed Doctors Without Borders. Anonymous. We can only tell the story of Biafra as if it did not happen, as a speculation or riddle, or something that may yet happen, maybe as a vision, as fiction, or a prophetic warning. Sergeant Isaiah Nwankwo, Biafran 39th Battalion, January 1970. Part 1. The Birth of the Star. The road to the hills is tenuous in the dark. When approached in daylight, it presents itself as a straight path. At night, it acquires a mystic character, appearing sinuous and much farther. But once the seer crosses the small creek, the road becomes more distinct, glowing under the eye of the moon, as if patiently waiting for him. The trees at the foot of the hills are thin and short, but their leaves, like those of all old trees, bear in them a provincial history of the universe. And now, having reached the summit of the hill, he stands in triumph. The star he has been following for much of the night has dissolved into a mosaic of colors, a bright purplish mass ringed with scattered archipelagos of yellow and crimson. He stands under the fugitive colors of its light, teetering on the verge of tears. The seer unrolls the raffia mat first, then sets down the things he has brought: a silver bowl, a water-filled demijohn, an amulet of stringed cowries and snake teeth. With the weight of dreams bearing down on him, he empties the demijohn into the bowl. The water stirs, bubbles up, and settles, its dark surface creased with spots of bluish starlight. He feels an anxious thrill in his body, for he knows that he is inching closer to that moment when Ifa's vision will begin, and he will bear witness to the future of the child about to be born. The seer has done this ritual only twice before, once under the supervision of his master a decade ago, in 1937, and 3 years later by himself. He has come to these hills bearing the dignity of a transgressive, knowing that he seeks this vision in part to redeem himself. Since the death of his beloved wife, his life has been stripped of its purpose by grief, so that all he wants now is to someday understand what happened to her. He clasps the amulet between his fingers and looks up at the horizon as it constricts, folding into the center where the prominent star he'd come to observe stands, radiant. The star combusts in a spasm of light and falls, tracing down like a flaming spear. It comes to rest just above the hill, over the seer's head, drowning him in the bowl in its bluish light. The seer gasps, for he knows the meaning of this. The person whose star falls out of the sky and rises back up will be among the rarest of mankind. An Abamieda, one who will die and return to life. "Baba, are you seeing this?" the seer says, pointing to the sky as if his master, dead, now 2 years, can see it. For so long, he's been wanting to experience this galactic miracle his master had often spoken about, to bear witness to the vision of a life that will defy death. After 25 years of practicing astral divinations, he has beheld it. The seer throws the amulet into the bowl. The water bubbles, calms, the ripples spreading in a widening gyre. The seer begins to hear voices, first distant and indistinct, as if worlds unknown and familiar are bleeding into one another, from different times and planes of existence. Colors flash in his eyes as voices erupt, fade out, and rise again out of the chaos. All the while, he mutters incantations. Around him, the night thickens. Drawn by the strange light of the bowl, insects mob him, and bats flit about the surrounding trees. The first images of the vision are grainy, like something seen through wet glass. But slowly it clears, and there appears the figure of a man in a room with a yellow bulb hanging from the ceiling by two colored wires. He is young, dark-complected, with a boyish face. The man is looking out the window of the room. As if he is slid from the old universe into the vision's new, future one, the seer finds that he can see the same things as the unborn man in the vision. He gazes through the unborn man's eyes for a moment, transfixed, awash in the light of this yet uncreated world. Chapter 1. For the first time in nearly an hour, Kunle rises from the cane chair and looks at his wristwatch, then at the small bush outside. The rain, which had started shortly before he sat to write, has stopped now. On the soft earth closer to the window, a small bird totters, a writhing red worm clasped in its beak. He feels again the presence, the unusual sense of something, a thing alive yet invisible, watching him. He glances up, then around, but there is no one. He begins to go through the story he has just written. At once he is surprised by how many of the details about the accident have remained in his mind, even after all these years. It was only this morning that he'd walked into the auditorium near the law building and heard a lecturer speak about writing to free oneself. He'd rushed home, picked up a pen and the notebook. And now pieces of his childhood, blown in from remote corners of the past, are gathered in these few sheets of foolscap paper. As he rereads, the details rise before his eyes in vivid colors. Nkechi, standing beside him, 9 years old, just like him. She wears on her face the beauty of youth. Her hair is permed and ribboned, and her skin shiny with cream. "Darling, let us send Tunde outside, though," she says, leaning into his left ear. "Let him not disturb us." "Oh, okay," he says. Nkechi whispers something else to him, and abruptly he turns towards the door as Tunde, only 6, comes in swinging. Tunde tells them he wants stew and rice and goat meat. Kunle listens to his brother's chatter with half his mind as Nkechi steps closer, cups her hand around his ear, and says, "Darling, send him away, oh. Mu, send him away so that he will not disturb us again." Kunle leads his brother out of the kitchen to the yard, partly grassy, partly dirt. He picks up a small green football from the dirt and kicks it over the fence. "It is a goal! It is a goal!" Tunde yells and runs out of the compound after the ball. Kunle hurries back into the house and locks the door. He is clasping his hands around Nkechi in embrace when they hear Tunde scream. This moment was hard for Kunle to write. 4 lines on the foolscap sheet were erased and rewritten, in some places twice over. But what he allowed himself to put down in the end is that he is confused, dazed. He runs in the direction of the scream and meets instead a small crowd of people. Tunde is lying on the ground beside an Oldsmobile whose fender has been damaged, doors flung wide open, and from whose rear a whiff of smoke is rising. Tunde's face is covered in blood, his hands thrown apart. "Tunde! Tunde!" Kunle cries, rushing forward towards his brother. He finds himself being pulled back by stronger hands as he kicks and flails, crying his brother's name. Kunle puts the book down presently and rises as if new blood has been pumped into his body, stirring every limb with its fresh, hot life. What should he do with his writing? For a long while he stands there with these thoughts, until he hears a knock on the door. He looks about his room and then, quickly, he dumps the half-eaten bowl of gari into the bucket under the table
Sample complete. Ready to continue?